Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in America. Now, this is a film, I've got it on Blu-ray here, that I've been, meaning to rewatch again for quite a while now, because, I did start my Leone, director series, I think maybe back in April, actually, and, I had a gap between Once Upon a Time in the West and A Fistful of Dynamite, and really the final result of A Fistful of Dynamite was probably, it did confirm my doubts, and that's probably why I put it off for so long. I just didn't want to see my first Leone film that was disappointing, really, because I loved all the other ones I've seen, and it was a shame that film was actually slightly under average. It wasn't didn't feel like a film that he put his full effort into. I think he was just kind of like a hire for job director on that. But yes, it wasn't. It was really disappointing. And that was in 1971. This was 13 years later. He had a massive break, and it was 10 years in the planning, actually, off and on, I think. I've heard that he came to De Niro at one point, and then things didn't come about, and then he came to him again, and it kind of went into into production and everything, and it's a film really that feels like a lifetime of planning, because it really does feel like the end of such a fitting end to his career. And of course, it's a shame that he only didn't make any other films. Really, it's just the six that he had full control of. Properly his films. I'm not going to be reviewing his first ones. Colossus of Rhodes and stuff. But yes. This film, this is my third watch. I watched it last night, and this was a rewatch, of course. I first saw it back in 2015, and the end of the year, and I watched it actually. It was a week that really I remember very vividly. It was just a brilliant week. I watched this, and then I also watched Gone with the Wind, and it was just two epics that, yes, I absolutely loved. And this is a film that, yes, I do love. And it's always been on my list of favourite films since I saw it, very high. Actually, kind of spoils for the end of the review, but yes, it made it into roughly my top 30 at the time. And back then, I suppose, though, I didn't see anywhere near as much films, classics in particular, that I have seen now. And it's almost 3 years later. But once again, it's now back up there, really. And yes, this film is just so mind-blowing, really. And I love epics, I always seek them out, actually. I actually go my way to seek out, epic films. I don't get excited, really, for an epic that's panned, like Novecento was. But, there's just, when an epic is great, it's just such a great experience, the journey of it. And just the fact you can follow characters, and situations and a narrative for really a long time, and you get the most out of, your sitting, you could say. And it just feels, when an epic is done, basically, my top 20 is full of loads of epics, half of them at least are epics. And I just think, this is one of the finest epics ever made. Robert De Niro, and James Woods, and you've got all-star cast. Joe Pesci actually as well appears. Burt Young, from Rocky, of course. It's a massive cast. And this is basically, it tells, it spans 50 years. During a lot of it's during Prohibition. So of course, bootleggers and everything. And yes, it follows these. Mainly, yes, four or five kind of guys' lives. In particular, really, James Woods, Robert De Niro's characters, of Noodles and Max, and the first sort of 30 minutes of the film, when I first saw it, I was completely just drawn in. It's very, very complex at first, really the first 30 minutes, and you should, when you watch it for the first time, if you've not seen it, you won't really know what's going on, because this is it's a non-linear film, and this is the it's meant to be. 229 minutes. This cut was, and of course, a massive history of when it was released. One of the versions that was released in theatres was just 140 minutes, and many criticised it. It was put in chronological order, and it completely butchered what Leone was trying to envision, and it was cut as well. So obviously, the difference in time, there's loads of stuff was cut out, apparently, you know, and I can imagine it was just a mess. And you know, this film is not. It's designed to be non-linear, so I don't know how they could have thought, the studios, that it could have been put in order and cut as well. You know, it's just actually really offensive when that happens. It's, you know, you can't imagine if you were to make a film and it was this years in the planning. You had Rob De Niro and everyone, and it was this ambitious film spanning an epic film with, you know, just all these set pieces and everything, and then, you know, you make a film that's so precise, so planned out, and then the studios cut it and butcher it without, you know, kind of letting you have your say, you could say. And it's disgraceful, actually. It's a real disgrace. And if I was to make a film and that happened, you know, anyone, you'd be pissed off, of course. But luckily, you know, there's two different cuts, I believe, now as well. You know, there's the longer one, actually, is like 250 plus, I think. Scorsese and that have actually worked in the restoration of that, and that's out now. I've not seen that yet. I probably will check that out, actually, now that I've seen it 3 times, this film. But yes, it's non-linear, and the first 30 minutes is basically shifting in between different timelines. You've got De Niro when he's really old, and then he's mid as well, you know, mid sort of age. And yeah, it's just, you know, it's so masterfully done, though. It basically is a very mysterious thriller for the first 30 minutes. And then it kind of, you know, dialogue starts to happen, more dialogue. And, you know, you've got the one of Noodles' friends in the bar, and, you know, they kind of have discussions and that. And it's just, all of this is, it's not just a thriller, complex thriller at first. It's so nostalgic, you know, it plays in, it actually reminds me of late autumn, when the kind of people were talking about their past and stuff at the beginning. And, you know, that's what this is. It's about, you know, childhood and stuff more than anything, and nostalgia in general. And, you know, it's just it draws you in so much, and I was already feeling really emotional, you know, the first 37 minutes, and then once that, I think around 37 minutes, it starts to flash back, and it goes back to the childhood scenes, and that lasts for about 50 something minutes, and that, you know, that segment in particular, some of the my absolute favourite stuff ever put to film. It is stunning. You know, it's just wonderful. You know, De Niro straight away, though, it's really important that De Niro was kind of there, and all these characters. You know, he showed the stuff that happens, you know, right at the end of the timeline first, because it kind of gives it that drive, and then you go back to the childhood scenes. If it was to start with this, it wouldn't have worked anywhere near as well. But, you know, it starts to, you know, show the kids, and it's just so, basically the childhood scenes, you know, it's so magical, so wonderful, and just so warm and charming. You know, all these characters are just great characters, you know, Max, Noodles, Cockeye as well. You know, all of them, they're just so good, and you know, it could go on forever in my mind, this stuff, and you know, it's just so, yeah, it's just so warm, and it's true as well. You know, it's quite you know, graphic at times. You know, like when they're getting beaten up by Bugsy and his guys, but you know, it's just wonderful. And then he's got this kind of, you know, Jennifer Connelly, a very young Jennifer Connelly, plays Noodles' love interest in the film. And it's just great. It's so great the way it's built up and everything, and the music in this film as well throughout is on another level. You know, Ennio Morricone, second or best film composer for me. You know, I think there's one that I prefer, John Williams, if you didn't know, and really actually they're quite close. You know, closer than, you know, most people would say. These two are by far for me the best film composers. This is one of his greatest scores, for sure. One of his top 5 probably. You know, I think The Good, Bad and the Ugly and Once Upon a Time in the West have got better music, but this isn't too far off, you know, to be honest. And it's just so full of nostalgia in the score alone, and you know, it's epic, it's operatic, and the way it's used, Leone knew how to use music perfectly throughout the entire film. It is cinematic perfection, and the way the music is used is mind blowing. And it just puts me in a trance throughout, and it just commands the, you know, the eye, and you know, just the senses. You know, it's such a beautiful score, and it's just so meaningful the way it's used throughout the film. Every piece, you know, it's just wonderful. Cockeye's theme, Deborah's theme, you know, wonderful. And then, you know, after the childhood scenes, you know, you go back to the kind of timeline, and then as well you've got stuff mixed in there with the you know, when they're old, and just the way that it progresses is absolutely perfection. You know, really. And then things start in the first, you know, half an hour, 35 minutes, start to kind of become clear. You know, a lot more as the film goes on, and it's just such a, the way that this film is designed. First of all, you know, and actually, you know, I do mostly, you know, when they're done well, you know, I do prefer linear narratives, but non-linear, when it's done like this, can work wonderfully. And it's so unique, you know, it's like a puzzle, masterfully constructed and edited. And, you know, every scene that leads into a different part of the timeline just gives it, it's always a momentum, you know, it's always a point that just punctuates, you know, and just, it kind of, yeah, it just, there's a drive that constantly flows throughout, in between a different timeline, and it's all related. And there's actually an injection of the childhood scene right near the end of the film that made me cry, you know, so overwhelming, actually, the injection of that. It was used at the perfect moments. I just couldn't quite believe, you know, how perfect, you know, all of the way that this narrative works. Perfect, you know, and it's just, it's a grand statement, and it's Leone's final film, and what a way to go out, you know, on. It's wonderful, you know, yeah, as I said, the score, the narrative, is, yeah, it's just so perfect, you know, and you know, towards the end of the film, with James Woods and Robert De Niro, just give some of the finest, so yes, particularly the last hour actually of this film, it's just some of the finest acting ever put to screen. De Niro and James Woods are equally just masterful in this film. And of course all the child performances as well, you know, perfect really, stunning, and it's such an emotional film. De Niro, you know, this is an underrated performance by him. You know, not a lot of people would say this is, you know, one of his best performances. I would definitely say that, and he's my favourite actor of all time actually, you know, at the moment. I don't think that'll change. And you know, his performances, you know, his best, probably, you know, Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, Deer Hunter, Godfather Part 2. This is probably, other than them films, it could be his best performance other than them films. You know, maybe I'm forgetting one, but yeah, no, it's top 5 or 6 performances from him. It's wonderful, you know. He's just able to say everything through his glances. He doesn't need to say anything, and we know what he's thinking. And then even when we don't know what he's thinking, it's more mysterious at times. You know, it's always intriguing, and he's such a well-written character. That's the thing, you know, Leone would be one of the screenwriters on this film, and for me this is Leone's best script. It's you know, it's a lot more deeper than West and Good, Bad and Ugly, but it's also got the quick, you know, wit to the script as well, the way it just kind of flows, and just this snappy dialogue, but it's also much more than that, you know, it's so deep, and it encompasses all, you know, just within the script, all the themes that Leone's trying to explore, other than just, you know, poverty, childhood and stuff, and just immigration and stuff, everything, you know, he's got so much in this film that it's just overwhelming, and, you know, you have to see this a couple of times to really, at least, you know, 2 or 3 times to fully get all of the, you know, see all of the themes that Leone was exploring, basically. It's because there's so much packed into this film, but it moves so well, you know, it's like, you could say it's like a Hitchcock film, you know, the way that it's for them as well, it's a thriller and stuff, and it's just so tightly constructed, but this is just, it just, you know, weaves in and out, and it's never less than perfection really for me. It's absolutely wonderful, and yeah, it's so tight, but you know, it just, you know, it's one of the best epics of all time for me. The cinematography, wow, you know, it's one of the best, you know, shot films of all time, top 25 for sure, and 3 Leone films are in that, you know, in that for me. You know, his best 3 films, I'll say it now, of course, are this, Once Upon a Time in the West, and The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. And actually, since I rewatched this film, it's actually hard to do my list now. I'm going to have to postpone my Leone ranking. It's that good, because it's really just shot right up again. You know, I did think I preferred the other 2 to this, but now, you know, it's going to be close. It's hard to decide because it's just reminded me once again how amazing this film is. and I've seen it. This is my third time. It's my best experience for sure. You know, and it's just the performances are so wonderful. It's not a single tonally as well. This film is perfect. There's never a moment that breaks tone, and the performances are so in tuned. They're never over the top. They're never. No one's ever bland in the film. You know, it's such a perfect balance. The editing is perfection. You know, it's just so wonderful. The cinematography, another level. And it's just so. You know, some of the best characters in cinema, you know, for sure. And this has got such a feeling to it, a nostalgic feeling, overwhelming really. You know, it's just even the bits when the De Niro's walking around the streets and that, it's just wonderful. This is such a flawless film, but it goes way beyond that. It's one of the absolute best films of all time for me. You know, the every act is just perfect. You know, I cannot flaw this film. And you know, just the fact that this friendship really, but very complex friendship, of these people, characters, in particular, you know, James Woods' character, you know, Max, and then Robert De Niro's Noodles, just spanning over this 50 years really. It's got such a progression to it, but you know, and it's such a meaningful experience. You know, it's one of the events of the century for me, this film, and you know, just the way that it's the very ending as well. You know, it's a very ambiguous ending. It doesn't lose the power though. You know, and that last, it's a freeze frame. You know, is one of the most powerful in cinema. It really can mean so many different things. And I think it's more simpler than, you know, people have analysed it to be. I think, you know, judging Leone, you know, yes, his films are deep at times, but you know, in particular this one and Once Upon a Time West, but I don't know if it was really, you know, something that complex, you know, the ending, what it meant, and actually I think, you know, it's a very comforting ending actually, but and yeah, I you know, you can take what you want from the ending, really the ending shot and what it means, but nevertheless, whatever it means, it is completely powerful, and I just think it's really quite a simple thing that focuses more on childhood and nostalgia, and what a wonderful way to end this film though, you know, and it just means so much to me, this film. It's directed, you know, better than most films I've ever seen in my life, and yeah, it's probably in my top 30 films of all time once again, which means it gets my highest rating, 100% plus, tier S. I think this is not just flawless, it's way beyond that. You know, I've actually had I've reviewed a couple of films recently that've got this rating. I think this is actually better than Badlands, which is saying something. It's that good. I don't think it's better than Days of Heaven. But yeah, it's right up there with the best films of all time for me, and you know, one of the best epics. To conclude, of course, you know, I'll wrap it up. You know, if you've not seen this film, you need to see it. It's a must. I'd recommend, you know, obviously the 229 minutes. If it's your first viewing, probably. I'm not too sure about the other version, the longer one. The only thing that's you know, put me off a little bit is the fact I've heard the scenes that are added are not the same quality of picture, and sometimes that can be off-putting. And I just don't know how it would fit in. You know, if it would be quite as perfect as this one. But you know, you can get this very cheap. It's Blu-ray, of course, and it's a must. You know, it has to be seen. And I remember when I first bought it back in 2014, and I waited a year. You know, it's just in my drawer, and I was building it up, and it exceeded my expectations. This is a film that is so you know, tightly focused throughout the entire film. It is, but it's part of this massive scale, this massive magnum opus from Sergio Leone. It covers so much ground. It has so many themes that he explores, but he does it so perfectly. It balances out everything in this film wonderfully. The music is overwhelming. You know, Ennio Morricone, you know, along with John Williams, the best film composer of all time. This is one of his absolute best scores. Probably his fourth best score that I've heard from him. It's full of meaning, full of emotion. This film is full of emotions. Every single frame is just perfect. All the characters and the relationships, you know, the friendships, however complex they are, are so brilliant. They're so perfectly constructed. It's so well written. It's so well directed, edited. The cinematography is so layered, you know, and the childhood scenes have got even more of a nostalgic look to them. Like The Godfather Part 2, you know, kind of looks more nostalgic and melancholic than, you know, in the De Niro flashbacks to the actual rest of the film, which is a lot more darker, of course. It's kind of like that, and the childhood scenes in particular are some of the absolute best stuff I've ever seen, that segment, but the whole film is perfect. I connect to every, you know, even though the characters are brutal at times as well, you know, you're always compelled by them. Yes, there's a couple that in the end, you know, I was thinking, you know, they're bastards, but you're always compelled by the characters because they're so well written. They're so flawed, you know, so flawed humans. But they're part of this massive epic, you know, a sprawling epic that's just really, yeah, it's just, some people compare it to the Godfather films, and I think, yeah, that's understandable because, you know, Leone, what he done here, and he was only really a Western director, to be honest. You know, 5 of the films he made, you know, were Westerns, and then he just comes out with this gangster film, you know, this massive epic gangster film. And it gives up most gangster films a run for their money. You know, I do think that The Godfather 1 and 2 are better than this. Apart from that, yeah, this is probably the greatest. You know, I think it's better than Goodfellas, actually. I think it's probably better than Scarface, the Brian De Palma. You know, it's just one of the absolute finest films ever made. And, you know, it's such a massive film, but it's so personal throughout the entire film, you know. Every single frame, as I've said, is perfect. It's mind-blowing, you know, and just the way that everything balances out and just culminates to this wonderful final act, you know. And the use of the Beatles' Yesterday in this film, the song, wow, you couldn't have imagined for a better use of that, you know, and that's probably one of the top 5 songs I've ever heard, Yesterday by the Beatles. It's used so well though in this film. It just weaved into the narrative so much. It's got so much meaning the way that's used. Just the soundtrack, the score overall is just, it's on another level, you know. And what a film to go out on for Leone. 1984, and yeah, it probably the best film of 1984. If you know, I may have forgotten something, probably not. But yes, this is a masterpiece, a magnum opus of a film. I've given 3 Leone films this rating, you know, 100% plus TRS, and actually, you know, it's going to take me time to kind of construct my list now, because of these 3 films, you know, they're all really on the same level in their own way, you know, they're just all so stunning, so mind blowing, and yes, there's probably I still know my number 1 probably, but 2 and 3 are very, very hard to decide, and yeah, that ranking will probably be up. It might not be up this week now. It'll probably definitely be up next week, by the end of next week. But yes, one of De Niro's best performances, one of the absolute best Leone films, and you know, it's a contender for his greatest film. I understand now how people can say, you know, this is his best. You know, there's not really a wrong answer really to his top 3 films. You know, what his best film is, because they're all so amazing in their own ways. You know, so mind blowing. They're all masterpieces, them 3 especially, and Leone's one of my absolute favourite directors, and this is, you know, really his passion project if you could pick one, and it's just got so much meaning, and one of the grand magnum opuses of cinema, once upon a time in America. Highly recommend it, and yeah, thanks for watching my review.